Wells used her paper to campaign against the growing number of lynchings, some involving mobs as large as 10,000 people. She described the carnival-like atmosphere in which black men, women, and children were hanged, shot, and burned to death for such offenses as non-payment of a debt, insulting whites, even testifying in court.
8 Negroes lynched since last issue of the Free Speech. 3 were charged with killing white men, and 5 with raping white women.
The charge of sexual assault against white women was routinely offered by the press and the authorities as the justification for these atrocities. Wells, at great risk, began to investigate these charges. One after the other proved false.
I also found that what the white man of the South practiced as all right for himself, he assumed to be unthinkable in white women. They could and did fall in love with the pretty mulatto and quadroon girls, as well as the black ones, but they professed an inability to imagine white women doing the same thing with Negro and mulatto men. Whenever they did so and were found out, the cry of rape was raised, and the lowest element of the white South was turned loose to wreak its fiendish cruelty on those too weak to help themselves.
Wells was now digging at the psychological roots of the sexual charges. She wrote an editorial about her findings.
Nobody in this section believes the old threadbare lie that Negro men assault white women. If Southern white men are not more careful, they will overreach themselves, and a conclusion will be reached which will be very damaging to the moral reputation of their women.
Wells was raising an unspeakable issue, suggesting voluntary relationships between white women and black men. It was an inflammatory idea. Outraged, the white press of Memphis rushed to the defense of white womanhood. Edward Ward Carmack, the fiery editor of the Memphis Commercial, led the attack, claiming that the black sets aside all fear of death for the gratification of his bestial desires. The Evening Scimitar had even more to say on the subject.
If the Negroes themselves do not apply the remedy without delay, it will be the duty of those whom he has attacked. Again, they're assuming that the writer of these editorials is one of the men associated with Ida Wells, to tie the wretch who utters these calumnies to a stake at the intersection of Main and Madison Streets, brand him in the forehead with a hot iron, and perform upon him a surgical operation with a pair of tailor's shears. Well, it's perfectly obvious what they were talking about there.
"30 years after the Civil War, the most basic rights of black Americans were effectively subverted. Determined to be heard, Wells carried her crusade to England. Her strategy was to mobilize moral as well as economic pressures abroad. She understood just how critical the English market was to Southern cotton.
One newspaper made this comment: "We're naturally loath to express any opinion upon the way in which our American neighbors manage their own affairs, but when ruffians take to skinning men alive, vivisecting them, burning them slowly to death, no decent man can resent the expressions of horror and indignation that burst from the lips of all observers." That's just one of the things the British newspapers were saying as a result of what Ida Wells was reporting to the British.
During 2 European tours, Wells met with every leader of public opinion she could find, from the Archbishop of Canterbury to the Duke of Argyll. Working through English and Scottish women reformers, she helped launch the London Anti-Lynching Committee, the first anti-lynching organization in the world.
She had interviews with all of the leading newspapers, with people in Parliament. These interviews were written up, and she sent them back to the Memphis newspapers so they could see the nasty things being said about them. And so, of course, they had to reply to them and say they're not so, that this is really a great and a decent
World. In the autumn of 1892, at the height of what was called the gay 90s, Wells stumbled upon an unexpected source of power: the black women's club movement. She was asked to speak at a testimonial given in her honor at Lyric Hall in Brooklyn, New York. Women came from as far away as Philadelphia and Boston. It was reportedly the largest gathering of black club women ever held.
Like many another person who had read of lynching in the South, I had accepted the idea meant to be conveyed, that although lynching was irregular and contrary to law and order, unreasoning anger over the terrible crime of rape led to the lynching, that perhaps the brute deserved death anyhow, and the mob was justified in taking his life. But Thomas Moss, Calvin McDowell, and Will Stewart had committed no crime against white women. This was what opened my eyes to what lynching really was: an excuse to get rid of Negroes who were acquiring wealth and property, and thus keep the race terrorized and keep the nigger down.
We are the stronger race. 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 We
This is Judge Joe Brown, and we're listening to We All Be News, news-free Dixie for the 21st century.
And also, I want to ask you something, too, I think is very interesting, like your take on the Bill Cosby situation.
Who cares? Who cares?
Yes, sir.
See, I went to some of those parties back when. You walked in, and they had a bunch of groupies, and these girls would take their tops and blouses off and run around topless in their panties trying to get laid. And then 40-some years later, they want to complain about it, and they kept going back over and over again.
What about Beverly Johnson, her confession in Vanity Fair, like her take on it? What do you think about that? Have you read that?
Yeah, I read it. More groupie nonsense. You know what this is showing?
What?
There's a new trend around the country that's showing up on major college campuses, and they want to change the definition of rape.
Mm-hmm.
They want to add a clause in there so rape is not just forcible rape, but if you seduce a woman, that's also rape. And they wanted rape that if you cause a woman to be sexually aroused so that she submits to sex, they want that declared to be rape. They want magazines, books, movies, TV shows labeled, warning, may be sexually arousing to young females. And they've even issued policies to various and sundry classes of freshmen. They tell the boys they have to ask 3 times. It's not okay to seduce a girl. You have to specifically ask, do you want to have sex before you start? Then once you're in the middle of the act, you're supposed to ask, is it okay to continue? And then before you come, you get to ask, is it okay if I finish now?
Wow.
Now, you know, that's getting really out of hand. And they want it so that if a girl submits to somebody and has sex with him and she feels remorse, the boy should be expelled from the school so she doesn't have to eyeball him the rest of her school career.
Mm-hmm.
See, that's all part of that little thing. You have to understand that Hollywood, the news media, all of this is driven by a select interest. an engine that has something they want to gain and a propaganda point they're trying to make. So when you get these, I think rape is one of the most horrible things going. But I was at some of these functions or parties, and what they're saying about what had happened is like, that's why they came.
Mm. So you've been to the Playboy Mansion before, correct?
I have been invited.
So that's how it is, like a wild, free love.
Yeah, I've been to all of these Hollywood parties. See, I was classified as a militant. So you go to this mansion up in the Hollywood Hills, and they invite Students for Democratic Society, Black Student Union, Panthers, this kind of thing, Chicano activists, and all the wild radical people, so the rich can say, oh, my God, it's so exciting being in here with all of these radical students. And yeah, they'd have parties like that quite often. So,
wow. Well, I'm sorry.
the women would keep going. So, I mean, you know, if something happened to you, you go back.
What's your take when they say it was some underage girls at the Playboy Mansion, like the 15 or 16 years?
I don't know. There's no telling what may have happened. So, like, you worried about somebody being underage and they're going on 60-something now?
That's a good point. I mean,
give it a break. This was 45 years ago, and now your face doesn't work because you have had too much Botox. You're not going to make a comeback.
That's a good point. Well, I'm asking this: are you a person that's been in the industry, Hollywood, entertainment, and been in the legal arena as well? Do you think this is some type of conspiracy against Bill Cosby? Why would they do this?
Because Bill Cosby is a straight, heterosexual, African-American man with too much bass in his voice.
Mm. Good answer. Wow.
And Philip and I had Philip Michael Thomas, who played Tubbs in the show. Sweetest man to work with. Anyway, we had a scene where we're chasing bad guys down the street. And it was downtown near the financial district. And there were these big buildings around, of course, and we were set up, and because we were pretty famous at the time, we couldn't really go out and do the rehearsal. So they set the shot up, and they said, okay, you just run out here, and you run down the street and catch the bad guys, and that's that. So action, we take off running, and the windows opened up, and panties started raining down. Not 100, thousands of panties started coming out of the buildings, raining down on the street. And I'm like going, what the hell is going on? There's panties flying, and we're chasing the bad guys, and there's panties falling on Philip's head. And so we get to the end of the block, and the director says, cut. And I said, what was that? And he says, it was Paul Michael Glaser was the director, and he said, well, it was a spontaneous raining of panties out of the sky.
He probably knew that from Starsky and Hutch, right? I would imagine they got some.
Fans of yours? But
wow.
Yeah,
That's crazy.
That was
and also unsanitary, I have to say.
Well, the hilarious part of this is after the shot, we had to do it again, of course, because we couldn't figure out a way to write in thousands of panties falling out of it. So the hilarious part was watching the PAs, the production assistants, and the assistant directors and everybody else go out and gather up the panties. off the street. That was the
harvest, yeah.
Yeah.
And then no more panties from the building.
Yes. Well, you know, pretty soon I think we did it 2 or 3 more times, and they ran out of panties.
Yeah, I mean, how many do you really have on hand, especially in the financial district?
Yeah.
Lincoln, along with other lawyers and judges, covered a 500-mile circuit twice a year on horseback. Lincoln became known for hard work and honesty. The other lawyers called him Honest Abe.
If you cannot be an honest lawyer, choose some other occupation. A worse man cannot be found than one who stirs up strife to put money in his pocket. Abraham Lincoln.